Hi everyone, my name is Sam and I am a health coach here at Revere Health Weight Loss and Nutrition Center. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys today about stress management and weight loss. I love this topic, and it is Mental Health Awareness Month, if any of you knew that. So, this is a perfect time to talk about how stress affects our weight loss. Especially with the coronavirus going on, I'm sure there isn't a single person that hasn't been affected in some way with changing schedules and new things to adapt to, which can bring a lot of stress. And so I think we're all familiar with the topic of stress. And if you're watching this, you're probably also wanting to maintain a healthy body. So hopefully I can share a few helpful tips on both of these topics to help all of us. The first question that someone may ask is what is stress? What does that mean? And stress really is an everyday part of life. There's not really anything that we can do to avoid it totally. It results from any change that we face, whether it's moving to a new city or small changes in our schedule. Day-to-day living usually brings a lot of small changes, but not all stress is bad. And in fact, if you think about it, if there was no stress in our lives, nothing requiring commitment or energy, then we probably wouldn't be very successful in our lives. So the goal is not to eliminate stress completely, but it's to figure out how we can manage the stress that does come up. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about today, is how we can do a better job of managing that and recognizing what are the stressful things in our lives. So another way that many people describe stress is the fight or flight response. I'm sure many of you have heard of this before. And this describes not just the emotional effects of stress, but how stress actually affects us physically and how it affects our bodies. So to go way back to our ancestors that lived here on the earth, hunters and gatherers. So day to day, they would walk around, and in order to live, they had to find food, they had to fight off animals, they had to survive the cold. So their day-to-day tasks were actually keeping them alive. If when they perceived something dangerous, let's say they saw an animal coming and they felt threatened, their body would react because it was trying to save its own life. And their body would react in such a way that they were ready to either fight what was going on, or the flight is kind of leave the situation and be able to escape from the problem. So that kind of describes why we're programmed that way. We came from those ancestors, and we also have that programming in our bodies, but now we usually don't face life or death situations on a daily basis. A lot of the threats that come into our lives are either perceived threats or things that still are stressful, but our bodies react in such a way that a lot of times it enhances the stress that we're already feeling. So this fight or flight response is talking about this physiological reaction when, like I said, we perceive a threat. It's triggered by the release of different hormones in our body, which is stimulated by something called the sympathetic nervous system. So our nervous system in our body, as it perceives stress, it's kind of like it starts to heat up, or it starts to go on turbo mode. It sends out different hormones, and these hormones affect multiple things in our bodies. They increase our heart rate so that we have the blood in our body to be able to run or to fight. Our blood pressure is increased, and our breathing rate as well is increased. And I'm sure we can all look back in our lives and think about a time when we've felt these things in our bodies. Maybe it's just when we think about the upcoming day and all that we have to do, our heart starts to pump fast. Or maybe it's when we were in a car and we almost got in a car crash and we could feel our heart beating really fast. So this is what is called the fight or flight response. And if our body is always in this mode, then we're going to wear out a lot of our organs and a lot of our systems. But today, because of how we're programmed, we're a very fast-paced society. We do experience this fight or flight response a lot more often than people did in the past, which is a little bit of a concern because, like I said, it can tire out our bodies and it can kind of keep our bodies in a constant stress mode. So there are a few different things that could potentially cause us stress. Number one is environmental. So there's a lot of things that we face in our environment. There's weather, pollens, noise, traffic, air pollution, storms, things like that that can cause us or our bodies stress. Number two is social, and I think this probably is a big factor. There are social stressors such as demands for our time and attention, job interviews, deadlines, work presentations. I could maybe say that my heart rate has increased a little bit as I'm presenting this. Or financial problems, the loss of loved ones, conflict at home, or just trying to fit in, trying to manage social media. So there's a lot of stressors that could come from the social aspect of life. Number three is physiological. So as we grow in adolescence, if we have a lack of exercise, poor nutrition, inadequate sleep, illness, injuries, all of these things are stressful for our body. And we can often feel the effects of this in muscle tension, headaches, upset stomach. And then number four is our thoughts. And I think often this is maybe one of the biggest things that does cause us stress because as we know, it's very rare that our environment causes us stress, but it's how we see our environment. It's how we interpret the things that are going on. There's just a little example. If we were walking through the forest and we saw a snake up ahead of us, maybe it's a big rattlesnake, we probably would start to feel stressed. Our mind would start thinking, is it gonna eat me? Am I gonna get out okay? How's my family? What if I don't get to where I need to be? All these things in our minds. But then if someone came to you and told you that rattlesnake was plastic, you probably would feel a lot different. Your heart rate would go down. You would think, oh, I've got this. I'm okay. Yeah, I can just keep going forward. I'll be safe. I'm not worried. And the situation or what you saw in the situation didn't necessarily change, but how you thought about the situation does. And that applies to so many things in our lives, that the way we process events is going to affect the stress that we feel. So I want you guys to take a moment and think about what you feel like is giving you stress in your life right now. We can all probably identify a few things that are causing that stress. Maybe it's that your schedule has just changed and you have a lot more things on your plate. Maybe you would say, oh, my kids are at home now, so that causes me stress. But think about what is it specifically? Is it more physically demanding because they're at home? Do you feel like you're not measuring up to maybe what your neighbors or your friends are doing? Is there more on your to-do list? What things specifically are giving you stress because your kids are at home? Maybe it's a certain illness that you or a family member has. Maybe there's an upcoming event that you're nervous about. But I want you to pick out something in your life that's causing you stress right now. And I want you to think about that as we go through this presentation. And at the end, I'm going to ask you to pick something that you can do, just something small, to help combat this stress and help start alleviate some of the stress that you're feeling so that you can handle other demands of life in a better way. So another thing that can relate to stress is this term, PNI is how I like to call it. I don't even know how to say that big long word. But what it is it's the study of how our emotions and our physical body are interrelated. And the reason that I bring this up is because it shows us that science has proven that stress and our thoughts really do affect us physically. And as we're talking about weight loss, that's a very physical change. So sometimes we may think, what I'm thinking is not going to affect actually what I'm experiencing and what my body does. But there have been many studies, and it's actually a dedicated field of study to figure out why this is the case. Our central nervous system sends certain signals to our body, especially our immune system, which reacts. So they communicate through messengers. And so this tells us that even when we feel like the stress is just in our minds, it is going to affect our body physically. And that's what this PNI is all about. It's studying that connection, which is really fascinating. If you're interested in that, you could look that up later and find some more things about that connection between our minds and our bodies. But I want to go on to asking the question of, okay, now we know kind of what stress is. We know maybe a few things that are stressing us out in our lives. But how does stress really affect weight loss? Because, I think that's a goal that most people listening to this have, weight loss or just keeping a healthy body. So how does stress really affect that? There's a lot of different reasons, but here I just want to talk about a few things that show how stress does affect our weight loss. Looking back to the fight or flight that we talked about at the beginning, when we're stressed, it's like our sympathetic nervous system is stuck on the on mode. So in this state, when it's constantly going, it's hard for your body to pay attention to anything else. If you think about that, if there's something really stressful in your life, that's kind of what's going to be the focus of everything. Almost every system in your body is going to be affected by that stress. And weight loss is a part of our physical body, is going to probably be the least important thing that your body's concerned about. So the first reason is that stress makes everything seem harder. I think this is definitely the case. Usually when we have something stressful in our lives, sticking to our goals is not going to be as high of a priority. We're going to feel maybe physically and also emotionally fatigued. And with that fatigue, we either won't feel like doing anything extra, going on a run or preparing healthy food, or we really won't have the energy to do that. We won't be as capable of doing those things to keep our body healthy. The second reason, it says stress erodes our self-control. As we're stressed, we have a lot of different hormones going in our body, and something that we don't have a lot of is kind of the happy hormone, or the hormone that makes us feel good. And so because of that, we usually are going to try and do anything we can to help ourselves have an increase of that dopamine. And a lot of times that will kind of ruin or impede our self-control, and as well as our self-esteem. I think as we're stressed and as we don't stick to our goals, it's kind of a downward spiral. And then the more we don't keep our goals, then the more discouraged we are, and we kind of just get in this negative self-talk, which is not a good snowball effect. The next bullet point says that stress can interrupt sleep, which can lead to moodiness and other bad habits. So most adults should get 7 to 8 hours of sleep each night. I'm sure we all have heard that before. And sometimes we could think, oh, it's not that important, but sleeping at night is one of the most important things that we can do for our body, because during this time, our body is doing many important things to repair and rejuvenate so that it's ready to go the next day. It's repairing things that we've damaged. It's also our mind is making connections, repairing different things in our body. And if we don't get this vital time to help our bodies rest and and prepare for the next day, then like it says, often we can feel moody or grumpy and engage in other bad habits because of this lack of energy that we'll have. Sleep also helps to regulate our hormones, and if our hormones are off balance, then again, this will lead to other bad habits to help us as we're searching for something to make us feel better. So sleep is very important for both stress and weight loss. The next thing is that stress can boost hunger. And this is both scientific and maybe a little bit of common sense. If you think about times that you've been stressed, there are some people that maybe don't eat when they're stressed, but there are a lot of other people that tend to stress eat, or they're so caught up in these thoughts that they're just gonna grab at anything that they can find. Any treat, maybe treats that they wouldn't usually eat that aren't very healthy, but they want that instant gratification and that instant sugar rush. So when we're stressed during this fight or flight response, our body thinks that we've used calories to deal with our stress, even though we haven't. So we're kind of tricking our bodies into thinking we're doing more work than we are. So our body will think that it needs to replenish those calories, even though it doesn't need to. And so this is one reason why you might feel more hungry, is because you're kind of tricking your body and making it think that it needs more calories. As well, when we're stressed, there's a hormone in our body called cortisol that will increase a lot. It's called the stress hormone. So that's going to increase, and as that increases, it can affect our blood sugar. So our blood sugar can drop, and as our blood sugar drops, we will crave sugary and fatty foods more often, which is a really interesting thing. So that's how we can see that not just emotionally but physically our body will respond to this stress, which will cause us to crave these foods that maybe we wouldn't usually eat. And the last thing on here says that stress can inhibit our metabolism. And this is something else that because our body's going to be focusing on the things that we're stressed about, it's not going to be as efficient with processing foods and digesting foods and using that for energy in other places. It's almost going to want to keep the energy to deal with the perceived stress that we have. So often that can slow our metabolism down, which, as we know, can lead to an increase in weight gain. So those are just some reasons why or how stress can affect weight loss, which is really interesting to see that correlation. So then the next question is, okay, so I have these stressors. Now I know that it is going to affect my weight loss. So what can I do about it? And I just thought of a few different ideas, things that have helped me and things that I have seen that have helped other people. So here's some ideas to combat stress. And as I read through these, I want you to think about these stressors that you're facing in your life right now, and something from this list or something else that you think about that you can implement into your life. And these are very small, simple things. It doesn't have to be a whole lifestyle change right at the beginning, but just a small habit that you can implement to help manage this stress. So the first one is recognize what is stressful for you. If we're not recognizing that, then it's going to be hard to deal with that stress. So recognize what it is in your life. Managing your time. This is something that has helped me a lot. There are a lot of different ways people like to manage their time. Using a planner and planning out their day in the morning so that they kind of have a snapshot of what they're going to need to get done. Setting timers for certain tasks. Even planning a week ahead, or even just writing 3 main things that you want to get done in a day and making sure that you can get those 3 main things done. The next one says exercise or get moving. I have seen in my life that this has helped me tremendously with stress. As we exercise, our body's releasing endorphins, and these literally make our brains feel more happy, which is kind of awesome to know that we can do something that's really easy and that can help us to feel better. Some people may say, no, but exercise is so hard, or I feel like I'm going to die when I exercise. But even just to get moving a little bit more, go on a walk around your neighborhood, walk around your house or your work building, something to get the blood flowing is going to really help to combat stress. Make time for something you're passionate about. A lot of times we have these to-do lists that are really long. We want to get everything done, but it's really important as well to make time for things that just give us happiness. Even if it's just 15 minutes a day, to give yourself kind of that mental break and to feel like you're accomplishing something exciting. Focusing on getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep, like we talked about before. This one's really important and probably something a lot of us could do better on. Spending more time outside as well, the fresh air and getting out of cramped spaces. Maybe you've been at a desk all day. Taking a little bit of time to get outside can often help our minds just feel a little more relaxed, give us more perspective. Writing your thoughts in a journal, this can often help a lot to get those stressed thoughts or those just kind of that jumble of thoughts that's in your mind, getting that out into a journal. And sometimes that can help us feel a little more relaxed. Start and end your day with something calm. A lot of times we have a bad habit of right as our alarm rings, we look at our cell phone, and right before we close our eyes to go to bed, we look at our cell phone. And this actually does a lot of harm for our brain, and it causes us to not sleep as well, and also it causes us to have more things on our mind throughout the day that can often lead to stress. Restructure just one negative thought. This is something that could be really important. Like I said, a lot of times the stress that we feel comes from the way that we think about situations in our lives. So it's hard to change our whole mindset at once, but even just taking one negative thought that you have and restructuring it into something a little more positive and optimistic could really help. Reach out to family or friends. This is something that could be really helpful. People that you trust, people that you can relate with. It's always good to find connection through other people. And the last thing says to take a minute to take some deep breaths. Again, this is both emotional and physical. As we get more oxygen to our brain, we're able to think more clearly. Our heart rate will decrease, and we can hopefully just feel less stress and more just a better outlook on the things that we're facing. I've also seen this one. It's crazy how just taking even 30 seconds to breathe deeply really helps me to feel a lot better when I'm going through something stressful. So these are just some ideas of how we can combat the stress that we're feeling. So I want you now to, again, think about the stressors that you thought about at the beginning of this presentation. And now I want you to pick one of these things that you could do a little better on in your life to help face this stressor that you have in your life. I promise you guys that these things can work. And maybe not everything will work for every person, but that's why it's important to try a few things out and see what works for you. See what really helps you to feel less stressed and more motivated to continue going throughout the day, especially during this time with a lot of things online, a lot of us inside. But I am confident that we can still reach our weight loss goals, or we can still see improvements in our health, even though it's a little bit more of a challenging time. And I love this topic, and I am just really excited that this is something we can all focus on at this time in our lives to continue taking care of ourselves emotionally and physically and mentally. So if you have any comments, feel free to write something in the comments below or ask any questions below, and we will try and reach out to you. But I hope you guys are all doing well and have an awesome day.